So today I am joined by the amazing Hannah, Matt, and Jamie from Diabetes UK. So Hannah and Matt are from the community and events fundraising team, and Jamie is a bit of a fundraising innovation one-man band, I'll say. So they're here to talk about the most common struggle faced by innovation and fundraising teams across the sector. This is something we hear from clients all the time. It is delivery, the big delivery beast. Once you kind of go through an innovation sprint or cycle, trying to get something out into the real world after that is generally when things become tough. So generally, there's a lot of excitement and speed that's typically associated with innovation projects. And then once teams get to that delivery point, that's kind of the main killer of innovation that we see. I kind of refer to it as organizational sludge, is kind of where the project can get stuck. And this can happen for various reasons, right? And it can be different in different organizations. Quite often we hear it's too many decision makers, too many cooks kind of come in at that point. There can be delays from support teams that have a lot of BAU work to deliver as well. There can be capacity issues within the project team and beyond. This is also the point where lack of buy-in from leadership can start showing up and rearing its heads. But generally, there's a few things there, but generally we kind of see these fall into three buckets, and we'll be talking to Diabetes UK today about them. They fall under culture, capacity, and prioritization generally. So the question at hand today is around how to maintain momentum and navigate these challenges. So first question, to get us going, I'd love to hear a bit of background on the project.
Yeah, happy to kick off on that one, Ben. So my name's Matt, and I'm Senior Community Fundraising Manager at Diabetes UK. And just to give a bit of context to this project, we started it back in 2022, I believe. It was at that point when we reached out to yourselves and several other agencies around a brief where we wanted to basically build a new community fundraising proposition with the aim of it being accessible, adaptable to all demographics beyond our physical activity-based events, which we have a lot of at Diabetes UK, which are very successful. And then I guess it was twofold. It was also to build the skills, experience and knowledge of the community fundraising team as well, and to upskill them in the innovation cycle, product development cycle as well, and to bring something to market essentially, and hopefully get some really engaging ideas off the back of the innovation process, which we were about to go into in that process with you guys.
Thanks, Matt. And can you give us a bit of an intro to what kind of came out of that cycle?
Yeah, sure. So obviously after those sessions that we did with yourselves and Jamie, many kind of interviews, workshops, very engaging sessions that we did, the outputs was two emerging themes. One of those was Wellness Month, and then the other one was the Midnight Gameathon. So there's two kind of clear kind of themes that emerged from a lot of the research and surveys that you guys had undertaken that we'd supported with.
So we've heard about the two ideas that came out and what you're kind of intending to do. I'm going to start with a very obvious one, but just in case you've got a clear answer for this, I'm not expecting one, but considering you delivered both those ideas in market so fast, is there any kind of like secret sauce at Diabetes UK that helped you do that? Kind of is there like one magic thing you can share with the rest of the sector that will help? Kind of is there anything there?
I mean, I don't think it's the one thing. I think there is a combination of everything, but something that really helped with getting us, I think, to a confidence level to take something to market was a testing approach. And that's, again, something that we had your support with. But I think that blocker for a lot of charities is that fear of, well, we've done all the research, we've done everything, but what if it doesn't work? And when you work in the charity sector and there's a lot riding on spending money, and you want to do that really carefully and with the best possible outcome, it feels quite risky to put something brand new out to market. So we did some testing of kind of like fake microsites and put those ads actually out into the world on Facebook to get some as robust as we could measures on things like cost per acquisition, click-through rates. Actually, do people respond well to this product? And we put 3-4 different products out there. I think that just gave us that confidence level to move forward. And I think that's the point where often you can get stuck. And that, for me, I think, and for kind of the organization, was a kind of a big tick to, like, we can move to that next stage of delivery now.
The one thing that I've got stuck before is trying to embed something new, where actually, if you can use as much as possible of what you're already using, is really valuable. So use existing platforms, processes, people. If you can repurpose budgets, do it. Just kind of use what you've got to hand, because it really, really minimizes the work with the dependency teams.
Let's dive into something you just kind of mentioned, Hannah, that kind of risk aversion, which is fairly common across the sector for some very good reasons. So I guess that falls under one of the three buckets I mentioned. Kind of falls under culture, right? There's often that kind of culture of risk aversion, and rightly so with BAU projects. It's about using donors' money, right, to kind of invest and kind of fundraise, and you want to do that in absolutely the right way. So there's risk aversion in charities for good reasons, but often that clashes with innovation projects, which need to have that little bit more risk involved. So keen to kind of hear a little bit more of a breakdown on any views you have on, I guess, the kind of culture element of kind of, how that kind of played out, and anything you kind of did at the start of the project or during the project to help with that beyond the kind of evidence you kind of talked about.
So I think one thing we really want to start off from the start is just being really clear who our stakeholders were, because we've lost projects in too many cooks before. So getting a very narrow pool of decision makers, making sure their roles are clear, and also making sure you have really clear decision moments along the way. And so we were lucky that we had kind of buy-in from senior team members, so we were able to identify one or two decision makers who could unlock quite a lot for us, kept those decision makers, and made sure we checked in between each test just to try and unlock that as much as we could, and that really helped. I think the other thing that we did was around the language around risk. So one thing we worked on with yourselves on was actually repackaging that as trying to dig a bit deeper and understanding what the key uncertainties were, rather than it's too risky, I don't want to spend money, I don't know whether people will buy it. It's actually narrowing down what that uncertainty is, making it something small, tangible, that we can test. So as Hannah said, looking at, can we do some Facebook smokescreen testing to actually understand whether people understand the idea, whether they'll click through to get some CPAs, and just how we can kind of chip away at those uncertainties in quite tangible ways.
I like that phrase of chipping away. That's definitely very true. On that kind of element, you mentioned you kind of had a small kind of cadre of kind of senior leaders that maybe could kind of sign off on things by the sounds of it, and kind of you work to keep that group quite small. How specifically did you do that? Because I know a lot of clients will go into innovation projects looking to do that, but then there's the realities of existing BAU processes and sign-off processes and many more people wanting to be involved. How do you kind of do that and manage those stakeholders that perhaps wanted to have more than a say than they did?
One thing that we did was really, really early engagement with stakeholders, to not just bring them in at the point of sign off. So I do think that we had a small group, but we did have the right people in the room, and at times it felt like quite a big group. But I think as early as you can involve people from your brand team, your digital team, your compliance team, your legal team, those that don't normally get to see the full end-to-end process of product development, is so beneficial when you're then asking for that sign off. So we brought in, as I said, people from our legal and compliance team into the very first kind of ideation sessions, and people from across the charity, which made that process a bit longer. It made the sessions a bit longer and a bit more kind of detailed, but it meant that they kind of got to see each stage and really feel part of that process, so that by the time we were coming with sign off, they knew the product, they knew how we'd got there, they knew that we didn't have to go through that kind of interrogation of, well, why are we doing this, and why are we charging that fee, and why are we going for that audience, because they've been involved throughout that.
Yeah, I think often, and I've fallen foul of this, but before, early on in my innovation career, you kind of know about the delivery issues, and you kind of know what's going to be potentially your blockers and who they might be within the organization, or which teams might kind of pose that threat. And I think the natural thing sometimes to do is to be secretive, right? And kind of like squirrel away and only come to people later down the line once there's, an idea to launch, and you absolutely need sign off from that group. But what you've talked about, what I've kind of heard from there is maybe a difference between like transparency, which is a good principle to have. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone gets sign off at every single point. It's kind of that element of transparency, and then there's some kind of clear kind of sign off moments in a smaller group that can kind of do that early on, and then people know what's coming, right? Because there's nothing worse than an enabling team or a compliance team being kind of shocked with something they haven't seen, and it's 3 months into development. So yeah, that rings true, and I think that's a really, really important tip. Unless there's anything more on culture, I'll move on to capacity, which is, I guess, the second most important thing we often hear. Kind of slows people down. Often you can start an innovation project with a fairly small team, but as it grows and you need to deliver things, you need more capacity from more people, right? And you need the space for kind of delivery teams to be brought in and find that time to work on it. So how do you kind of navigate that? I'd love to hear.
I think the most important thing is to have dedicated roles. If you're going to innovate, you have to make space, and you need to have support and dedicated people to work on that. So we're very lucky that we have Jamie, who is a dedicated innovation role within the organization. And without that, this wouldn't have happened as quickly as it had, because Jamie was able to lend those skills of project management and development and innovation, and kind of help with the workshops and just help that ball keep rolling as well. And then we did a mini kind of shuffle around, not a restructure, but a shuffle around within community about 18 months ago to allow some space for product development, because we knew, as Matt said at the beginning, we didn't have products in community. We knew that we needed to kind of keep up with all of these trends. So we built that into the team to have a dedicated role that could focus on product development. And if you don't, working with an agency is an alternative that can offer that. So working with yourselves and Good was hugely helpful, again, just to get the diary management, the planning, the insights, all of that you kind of don't realize how much time it takes, and it can be months between catch-ups, whereas actually working with an agency builds that structure, and it gives you deadlines that you have to work within. So
yeah, you definitely need the skills as well as the capacity is kind of really critical.
The reason that you're innovating is to create a new product, and if that goes well, which hopefully you're going into it thinking it will go well, you will need somebody to manage that product.
Third one, another tricky one. I guess this is around prioritization, and sometimes this falls under kind of senior buy-in. You might get a bit of sign-off for an innovation team or function to explore a space, but when it comes to actually delivering something, there's maybe not enough buy-in to make some of those decisions you reference, Hannah. Do you need to drop something in your marketing calendar to make some space for this? Do you need to reassign someone who's working on a BAU project to kind of help deliver this? It can get really tricky on the prioritization front. So I'd love to hear how you kind of looked at that and approached it.
The biggest things for prioritization is defining what innovation is and some of the language around it. And I don't think we did that very well. It's probably something that we would do differently in the future in getting that senior buy-in. If you're putting a budget forward and you have a BAU product that is going to bring in £50,000 net, and you then put in an innovation product alongside it that's going to bring in minus £5,000, it's not going to be a difficult decision for somebody that's really away from the detail to say, well, we're going to go for net income. And what we hadn't done is kind of put the parameters around kind of why that's a net loss and what it would look like in 3 years and 5 years. And I think if we had some of that language around what we mean by a pilot product and why it would be net neutral or bringing in a loss in year one, and what we mean by an MVP and why it's a little bit more risky or it doesn't look as shiny as this BAU product over here, we kind of didn't have that language ourselves. So I think that's something that helped us. We kind of figured it out along the way, but I know you mentioned that it is a frustration that people get asked for kind of 5-year plans on a product you've not even taken to market yet. But there is a benefit of showing in 5 years, if everything goes well, this is the potential, just to show the story, but then having, I think, really specific measures of what success looks like, and being really honest at the start, saying success for us looks like making a £5,000 loss on this product, because if we hit all these other things, we've got confidence. But as we develop that language around well, there's not an expectation for a pilot to make a profit in year one. That's just not something that we would expect from that. But we would expect these other metrics to be succeeding. It shows that data and that evidence.
Yeah, it's a tricky space that I think, yeah, a lot of clients and outside the sector, it's a challenge as well. It's what are those innovation metrics, and how do you avoid comparing apples and oranges? Like something that's been in existence for 5-10 years shouldn't be compared with something that hasn't even come into existence yet. You shouldn't be kind of pitting those two things together. And I think you touched on, I guess, those innovation metrics. I'd love to kind of hear how you're starting to think about that. I guess income isn't the one initially. That's not what you're looking for. You're kind of looking for the potential, and as you said, you kind of can map that out, and there's other metrics around maybe acquisition and how much you're kind of costing an average gift and things like that that perhaps you're looking at. I'm just kind of keen to hear if you're starting to think about some of that stuff.
Yeah, I guess some of the other metrics that are directly comparable, like you said, cost per acquisition, if we can show that it's lower than one of our BAU products, then that's a huge sign of success. It's trying to look at the really detailed metrics rather than the scale, because scale is not something that in year one on really limited budgets you're going to be able to achieve.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I mean, beyond income, although we did a return of sorts in terms of income, we were looking more at the demographic, the breakdown, things like the activation rate in terms of the fundraising pages, average gift, and then in terms of some of that more kind of qualitative kind of research and information, the cause connection of that audience as well. How well connected were they to diabetes? And we got some really, really good data out of both of the products that we ended up bringing to market. And that's something we can kind of extrapolate and kind of expand on and make some really kind of sound predictions on what the version 2, what the actual full rounded version of both of these products will look like in year 2. So but we had to have kind of consensus and agreement on what those metrics were from the outset. What does good look like? Because then if we had kind of agreement on that, could we agree on what would constitute taking it through to the next stage? So I think that was a really important thing to consider.
Nice, I like that. I love how you're taking into account cause connection. That's such an interesting correlate for, I guess, how loyal those supporters might be, and how much they might give, and whether they'll come back to that event as well, and whether they're going to other parts of your organization as well, I imagine, because events can often be, as you well know, a nice like acquisition channel as well. So yeah, super interesting. Unless there's anything else on that, I'd love to hear if there's any other kind of struggles you've kind of overcome as part of the process, or any other tips you might have for other charities that are just embarking on an innovation sprint and probably now thinking, oh God, delivery is going to be challenging.
I think I can pick up on one of Hannah's points around language. One thing that I found is most people don't know what MVP means. It's an acronym that doesn't mean much to most people. And I think you are potentially overselling yourself if you say you're going to launch something. There's a lot of dependency teams involved in that, it's a lot of budgets. And you may undersell it, but it's a lot easier to explain it if you just describe something as a test and just point out that you're testing at each point.
100%. Yeah. The two most powerful words in kind of innovation is test and experiment. I think they get you a long way. Yeah. And yeah, I like that idea of there's so much lingo in innovation. I'm a culprit of this, being an innovation consultant. There's like 10 different ways to explain an experiment or a test, and no one really knows or cares what each of those very specific things mean unless you're kind of doing it yourself. So I like that idea. Finally, what have you learned? Any surprises? Any good nuggets of wisdom we can hear about?
There's definitely areas to improve on, but I think it's given us a solid base on what we can kind of move forward for next time. So I think it's suffice to say, bearing in mind that expectation piece around not necessarily, knocking it out of the park in terms of income, that I think we'd deem both those tests as a success in terms of an MVP.
Amazing. I love that. Thanks for sharing. It sounds like, some really, really good results to work on, and awesome to hear there's some clear areas that you can improve, right? That's always good to hear. Really exciting.